Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Welcome to Naya Sim or Cimnanya, and thank you all so much for all the love and support. Hope you all are doing great. So, this young man actually came out to say that most Black people do not know how to say ask, right? When they want to say ask, they say ask, you know? And you all know Black people have this AAVE where they ask and all that. I mean, everything must not be perfect because I feel like so many things are rooted on racism and all that, or internalized racism. I don't understand. I don't know how to put it, but man, why is it that somebody's pronunciation is affecting you? And the fact that most Black people use AAVE instead of ask, they say ask, or some probably cannot pronounce it. It's okay, right? So how come they are saying that when you cannot pronounce ask, it means that you are slow? And I want to ask, does it mean that they can pronounce everything in the whole wide world? Like, can they pronounce everything? Even as human beings, there are some things as tiny as they may see and all that people cannot pronounce. Why is it that every time they wake up, they look for a way to attack Black people, like in different forms and all that? I mean, you already know that they say Black people are genetically inferior or mentally inferior and all that. So this one actually came out to say, if you cannot pronounce ask, it means you are very slow. Let's get into this video.
I've never heard someone say it like axe. Try meeting some Black people.
This poor man, he has been fighting with people in his comments about how you say ask versus axe.
It is not axe.
And specifically when you grow up in white spaces, the teachers, especially if they're not Black, will say that's not correct English, and a lot of teachers will be like, that's not correct English. And I need you to understand that it is not standard American English. It is African American vernacular English. They're two separate languages. They sound the same, but they're not the same. And then he goes on to say that he is an extremely educated colleague who says ax instead of ask. But when he's in a professional setting and when he's teaching his students, he teaches them to say ask instead, because he knows how they're going to be perceived if they say ask. And those of us who know the difference, we call that code switching, because, when you're talking to white people, it makes them very uncomfortable when you use AAVE, especially when you're in a professional setting. A lot of professionalism is rooted in racism, because only white people are supposed to have enough of an education to be able to get to the high seats or highest levels of anything. That's how the United States has historically been structured, right? And so as an audiologist, when I was teaching undergrad, I would have mostly speech language pathology students. Most of them were white, and I would ask them about whether or not they knew about AAVE. Now, ASHA is the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association. It is the governing body for speech language pathologists and audiologists, okay? If you go to their site, they have article upon article upon article about the importance of teaching Black students that it's not wrong. It's just a different language. Okay, so children from a young age need to learn that the different pronunciation of words that are in English, they're not bad. So they don't feel shame about their culture, about their history, about how AAVE was formed out of necessity. That's why when there's phrases that catch on by the general public, the catchphrase then ends up changing, because the entire point of AAVE was so that white people didn't know what we were talking about, so that we could be safe. Historically speaking, that is how that language evolved. So it is a closed practice. Not everybody needs to know everything. Not everything is for you, right? So in order to be a part of corporate America, of I don't know how to explain it, but to be in white spaces and be successful and accepted because it's a primarily white space. And I'm not talking about you poor people. Like anyone who is raised around a lot of black people, they're probably going to be speaking AAVE, right? It's just a different language. It's not wrong. It's different. It's a separate language that has its own rules. Like, that's why some of y'all come up here and you're typing and we're looking at it. You got things out of order. You don't know what the hell you're saying. You look a hot mess. We can clock it immediately. Like, yeah, that person doesn't. Yeah. You're like, I'm black. Yeah, ain't no way you're black. You don't know the rules of the language. When you're hearing it, you think that it sounds uneducated. And when we hear it, we know exactly what we mean to say. And so when there's speech language pathologists who are like, no, that's not how you say that, that's incorrect, then you're like damaging the soul of those children and they don't want to work with you. And then you wonder why you can't get anywhere with them. And it's because you have completely and totally insulted everything that they know. It's the same thing for speech language pathologists who want to work with a Spanish-speaking population, but they don't speak Spanish, so they don't understand the rules of Spanish pronunciation. They can't tell the difference between a child who is actually making issues with how they're pronouncing, like what their mouth movements, and when they're using the rules for one language for another. That's it. They're two different languages.
It is not ax. It is ask. Ask you a question.
So I'm not tagging this creator directly because they're a very small account and I don't want him to regret all of his life choices just because he decided to respond to me, but I do want to address the points he made in his video because every single thing that he says here is both wrong and stupid. But there are actually very common points that I hear a lot every single time I bring this up. So I'm going to respond now to all of these points, hopefully as clearly as I can, so this is the last time I have to break this down.
Because they're common mistakes does not make them any less of a mistake. Because you repeat a lie often enough does not make it the truth.
Actually, in this context, it kind of does. You're right to say if a bunch of people just start saying 2 + 2 = 5, that doesn't mean 2 + 2 is now equal to 5. But here we're specifically talking about pronunciation. And now let's think for a second, what does this word mean? What does a word's pronunciation mean? Well, a word's pronunciation is how it is pronounced. It's how people pronounce it. Now let's ask ourselves, how do people pronounce this word? Well, some people pronounce it ask, and some people pronounce it ax. Therefore, both of those are pronunciations of this word. By definition, pronunciation is how something is pronounced. So if something is pronounced a certain way, then that means that is one of its pronunciations. It's really as straightforward as that.
And if you want to be wrong, you can be wrong. You can just say, yeah, this is how I pronounce ask. You're still wrong. You're saying it incorrectly. You're pronouncing it wrong.
I want us to stop and really think about this for a second. What does that mean? To say that someone is pronouncing a word wrong. Now, don't just say, oh, it means they're using the wrong pronunciation, because then you're just begging the question ad infinitum. What do we mean when we say you are pronouncing it wrong? Who is deciding that? Who is deciding that the word is being pronounced incorrectly if this is a pronunciation that millions of people use? And before you embarrass yourself, no, it is not Oxford or Merriam-Webster. Neither of them do that. And it's not about which pronunciation is the most common either. This word over here can be pronounced either caramel or caramel. This word can be pronounced privacy if you're American or privacy if you're British. You would never call either one of those pronunciations wrong, even though Americans outnumber British people 5-1. You recognize that things like privacy, garage, tomato, or aluminium are all just British pronunciations. And so I want you to stop and ask yourself, why is it you're willing to accept an alternate pronunciation as a correct pronunciation if it's a pronunciation used by British people, but not if it's a pronunciation used by black people? I'll give you a hint. There's only one answer to that question.
You get the desire to be right about something, but unfortunately, the world is not about desire. It's about reality.
You're correct. The world is about reality. And the reality is, axe is a pronunciation that has been used for over 1,000 years. It was actually written in the very first English copy of the Bible, literally axe, and it shall be given to you. Hope you're able to learn this lesson yourself. The other day I made a video about ax versus ask, and the comments on that video are some of the dumbest I've ever received, which is saying something. So here I'm going to respond to every single argument against the pronunciation ax and why they are all invalid. Number one, doesn't the order of the letters determine how it's pronounced? Well, not if it's this word, because if you're an American, odds are you don't pronounce this as comfortable, but as comfortable, literally putting the T before the O. We do this on short words too. This word you do not pronounce as iron, but as iron. But even that rule is not consistent. This word is not ironic, but ironic. But this one is pronounced both irony and irony, which means you can have two different pronunciations of the same word, both be valid even if one of those pronunciations swaps the order of the letters. Number two, the British examples don't work because they still say the letters in the right order. Actually, the British do this too because this is how they spell center. Well, actually, they spell it both ways, but they mean different things, but are pronounced the same way, which means they swap the order of the letters, but that doesn't change the pronunciation. Number three, if I pronounce the word hello by saying flub, is this a valid pronunciation? No. In the video, I say pretty explicitly that pronunciations are how people, plural, pronounce it, which means more than just you being an intentionally obtuse jackass. What if I convince millions of people to do the same and more people end up pronouncing it my way than the standard way? What if? You know what? Go ahead and do that. And if people actually end up changing their pronunciation, you can use that as an argument. But until then, try to use pronunciations that people actually use if you want to argue with me. Number five, proper pronunciation. I thought we all learned this in school. No, you didn't. The English you learned in school is not the English that you considered correct. If it was, you would have noticed the grammatical mistake I just made. The only reason you consider this pronunciation proper is because it's the one that you've heard for most of your life, and you don't want to admit that your speech isn't proper speech. Number six, it's pronounced in a way that isn't derived from how it's correctly spelled. I got bad news for you. English does this a lot. Worcestershire, quinoa, rapport, kernel, bologna, Greenwich, Wednesday, subpoena, February. This word is pronounced key. Key. You'll never catch me saying ax instead of ask. Okay? I don't say ax either. I'm just not so dense to think that my way of speaking is the only correct way. I've never heard someone say it like ax. Try meeting some black people. Bro, what do you mean who's deciding how it's pronounced? I mean exactly that. If you say it's wrong, that means someone is saying it is objectively wrong. Who? If it's a pronunciation that millions of people use, why is it incorrect? And this last one is my favorite one, where they say, all I know is that when I hear someone say ax, I just assume they are slow, and I need to start talking slower. First of all, this should be more slowly. But second of all, this really proves my point that this all stems from internalized racism. Because I guarantee you, if I made this video about caramel versus caramel, they would have not said that. They would have not said, oh, if I hear someone saying caramel, I assume they're slow and need to start speaking more slowly. People who say caramel don't correct themselves and say caramel when they're in a job interview because they're worried about sounding stupid. But people who say ax will correct themselves to say ask for that exact same concern. I know this. I used to work at a Title I public school here in New York City for 5 years. And I remember black teachers would often correct their students to say ask instead of ax. Why? Not because they thought it was wrong, but because they knew that if they said ax in a job interview or in a college interview, they would be viewed as uneducated, regardless of how good their grades were. My co-teacher had 2 master's degrees, and he still said ax. This has nothing to do with being uneducated. He said ax because he has an accent. And the truth of the matter is, all this hate against the pronunciation ax, which, yes, is rooted in internalized racism, is stupid. Because there is no valid reason you can give for why ax shouldn't be considered a correct pronunciation that you can apply equally across the English language. It doesn't exist. Which means you are very hypocritically saying to millions of people that they have to make a conscious effort to alter their natural way of speaking, the way they've been speaking their entire lives, but you don't. Why? Well, because you happen to grow up in a neighborhood where people were speaking, quote unquote, properly. Anyway, shout out to this guy for borderline advocating for racial discrimination by saying, if you pronounce it ax, I don't hire you. Nice.
So this is all I got from the stitches, and a lot of people actually came all out in the comment section trying to, like, you know, say some nasty things about black people being slow and all that. And I am asking, just because you are probably not pronouncing, does pronunciation make people smart or intellectually smart and all that? I don't think so. I don't think because you pronounce something right or something And moreover, some are, if you are not a white person, you probably might have accent and all that. So I don't see anything wrong in people probably not pronouncing some things correctly, and as long as you understand what the person is saying. So for the other young man actually went to his page to check if I would see, like, the video he made, only to find out that he deleted all his videos and all that. He probably couldn't stand the heat, because people actually came for him to ask him, wait, when is it that, like, why is it that no, when you can't pronounce ask, you are now dumb and slower, and people shouldn't be talking to you like, fat, like, and they forget that black people have AAVE and all that. So most times they use AAVE. And so if I am using AAVE to speak, and it must be correct and all that, man, you all should let us be. And I don't know why is it that you all wake up every day to, like, look for something to talk about, like, black people are mentally inferior, black people are genetic, like, everything about us is, but yet you people are still very scared that the table is going to turn, yet you all cannot stay outside under the sun, and you get so scared of having sun poison and all that. Let us be. We have accents, so really, I just don't understand why everything is a problem. Like, must everything be a problem, and if you do not understand AAVE, let black people be. You all stop complaining up and down. And the other one said, have you met black people? Have you seen black people say ask, right? So they say ask instead of ask. Man, as long as I understand what you are doing, what the hell, I don't care. I don't care if your pronunciation is correct or not correct, or as long as I can tune in with you, with what you're saying. So you all let black people be, let us be, and if your accent is perfect, let it continue to be perfect. Some people do not have that perfect accent, or do not pronounce things correctly, and I am sure there is also something they do not pronounce correctly. It's not about even being a black person or speaking AAVE. I mean, there are some things you would ask someone to talk or say, pronounce or something, and they are not able to pronounce it, So why is that a problem? So they are trying to tell me that, they can pronounce everything, they know everything and all that. No matter how smart you are, it might even be a very tiny something that you are not able to pronounce and all that. You are not able to pronounce correctly. So when you all wake up to say, meet black people, they don't know how to say ask. When they want to say ask, they say ask. Man, let us be. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.